I'm going to do a hinge pocket with a router. What I first need to do is I need to trace out the actual hinge. This is a square hinge. You're going to have to chisel the corners to get them square. You can also buy hinges with rounded corners, which will make it a lot easier, and that way you don't have to chisel them out after. Once I've traced out the hinge itself, now I can take measurements, and what I need to do is I need to add an extra 1/16 inch here, 1/16 inch here, a 1/16 of an inch on the top, widthwise. That way, that allows for the thickness between the actual cutter and the bushing guide itself. Now that I have it laid out with the extra 1/16 on either side and on the top there, I've also made a center line on this. And so what happens is the hinge is 3.5, add the 2/16 gives me 3 5/8. Half of that is 1 13/16, which gives me my center line. What I've done is I've basically used my square and I've basically transferred them down a little bit. And that's the way I can basically set my jig up so it sits exactly where I need it. And I'll work off the center line. Now what I've done is I've transferred the actual size of the pattern to the actual template. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take it on the bandsaw and I'm going to cut it out. If I make it flush with the outside edge here and I line up the center lines, my hinge is going to be exactly where I need it. What I've done is I've lined it up flush up on the front and I've ran a pencil in along the board there. And then what that gives me is that gives me a guide to put another backer board up against it, so I have something to clamp it to the piece. Here's what the template jig actually looks like. What I've done is I've added a piece that follows the line that I had put on there. I've pocket hold this to the back of that piece. You could also flip it over. You could run screws on the top, put them down below the surface so they don't get in the way of your router, or you could glue and brad nail them too. With the piece that I put underneath, making it longer, allows me to clamp it in place with a couple of clamps. And because it's with the small unit, I don't have to worry because the clamps aren't going to be in my way. The right depth is I put the hinge flush with the surface and I ran a pencil underneath to give me the mark for the actual thickness. So I have that mark that's there. And that's going to use as my guide, and I'm actually going to do it on a test piece to make sure that I get the right depth. You might want to do it in 2 passes and make sure that it's the right depth on the second pass. So I've set the cutter up so that it's just on the line. I'll make a test pass on a scrap piece and then I'll test the hinge on it. So with this here, I've got the guide bushing on the bottom. I've already set the bit. So what I need to do is I have to make sure that I balance it. So I'm going to kind of come in on a bit of an angle, come in, and I'm going to follow the pattern, and then I'm just going to chew away at it until I have it all done. The hardest thing on a small little base like this is to keep it balanced. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take my hinge and I'm going to put it up against the piece that's sitting above, and I find that it's not quite deep enough. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to actually set it a little bit deeper and make another pass on it. So now the hinge is nice and flush. Problem is because the round bit on the router, I have a rounded corner now. So I'm just going to take a little chisel and I'm going to just knock those little corners off, and then it should slide right into place. So now with cutting the corners with the chisel, it didn't take very long, and now we have a nice tight fit.